Good evening. I'm Alan Jackson, and welcome to Nashville. I want to begin with some good news. America's global leadership is being recognized again. But with that, there's some big issues that need to be settled. For one, Russia and Ukraine are behaving as though they're in a fight to the finish. If an end to the war is not found, Zelensky will eventually run out of people to fight the war, and Putin will get what he wants. India and Pakistan have squared off this year, and nuclear weapons are a part of that equation. Then there's China, which may be willing to talk about a tariff deal, but they're never going to stop building up their military. The Chinese Navy now has 400 ships. And while Hamas and Hezbollah have been crippled, ISIS is making a comeback in Syria and Afghanistan. And so is terrorism aimed at the Jewish people. With all of that, I'd like to bring in our Chief National Security and Military Analyst, Captain Chuck Nash. Welcome back, Captain.
A pleasure to be with you, Pastor.
Let's start with the continued attacks on Israel. The Iran-backed Houthis fired 2 more long-range missiles at downtown Tel Aviv this week. Fortunately, they were intercepted before they hit anyone. How do we resolve these random attacks of terror from the Houthis?
They're going to have to realize that they're in a losing battle. The Iranians are going to have to realize that supporting them just extends their vulnerability even more. We've had recent reports, though unconfirmed, that the Israelis are preparing a strike on Iran. So these activities just hasten a kinetic action against the Iranians. So I think what really needs to happen is the Iranians, as the sponsors of the Houthis, need to back them off.
There seems to be some chatter I keep hearing that if Israel were to attack Iran, that spirals into some larger global conflict. Do you share that fear?
It very well could. One of the things that I think the Iranians would do almost immediately is attempt to mine the Strait of Hormuz, which would shut off Saudi oil coming out of the Gulf, and also oil out of the UAE. So that would certainly send a shock to the markets. But also what would happen is the Iranians, I believe, have cells, sleeper cells, spread throughout the Western world, and they would be activated should kinetic activity start. I'm pretty sure of that.
Well, that conflict in the Middle East had an expression a little closer to home. Last night there was a very tragic double murder. A young couple, both of whom worked for the Israeli embassy in Washington, were shot and killed while they were visiting a Jewish museum. Even more tragic because they were about to start their life together by getting engaged. Well, the Israeli Prime Minister said it was the result of the wild incitement against the state of Israel. You know, Chuck, he's surely referring to American campuses, Columbia University among them, where Jewish hate has been allowed to take place despite the threat to Jewish students. How do we deal with this growing anti-Semitism here at home?
We enforce our laws and expel those who refuse to live by them. Coming here as a foreign student is a privilege, and we allow that because we're a welcoming people. However, for those who will not abide by our laws, not just foreign students, but U.S.-born students, U.S. citizens, they've fallen into this trap. And what's happened here, I think we have the confluence and the joining, rather, of the American political left and the radical Islamic activists. And they share a common enemy, which is Western culture, and specifically U.S. culture. And so they've teamed up together in this unholy alliance. And it's going to take enforcement of our laws and not just turning a blind eye because, oh, they're just young students. No. You break the law, you pay the price.
Well, I actually think there's one more component to that unholy alliance, and it's our academic institutions. They seem all too willing to push that leftist propaganda and the anti-Israel, anti-Semitic hate. Am I misreading that?
No, not at all. And one has to wonder how much of that is influenced by the tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars that some countries have poured into to create Islam study centers and things like that in in religious universities like Georgetown and others. So it's kind of a widespread seeding of capital into these things, which then I think tends to influence their decision making.
One more question on Israel. President Trump was able to negotiate the release of the last American hostage, but do you think Israel will be able to free their citizens? There's only 21 of them believed to still be alive. And if not, I'm curious from your military perspective, why hasn't Israel been able to rescue them?
Well, if you look at some of the videos that have come out of Gaza, it's mostly rubble. And if you take that rubble and you realize that underneath it is an entire labyrinth of tunnels, a whole network has been built down there, miles and miles and miles of tunnels and staging areas and things like that. So how many of those hostages are still alive? I don't know. But in fact, nobody knows. I don't even think Hamas knows what they're sitting on, because their leadership is getting wiped out. I saw a report earlier today where the Israelis believe that they killed Sinwar, Mohammed Sinwar, who was the brother of Yahya Sinwar, who was killed previously. And his brother Mohammed took over the reins of Hamas. Well, the Israelis now think, based on intelligence and forensics, that maybe they killed Mohammed Sinwar earlier this month. So who knows? I'm sure that they can't communicate other than with runners passing notes, because any electronics communication would be immediately intercepted by the Israelis. So they're back to caveman days, and they're living in caves, only they're man-made in their tunnels.
Well, let's move to Russia and Ukraine. While attempts have been made to get a ceasefire, it looks as though nothing will get done until President Trump works it out. And the president sounds determined to stop the killing, as he said repeatedly. Listen to what he said.
We have to get that thing solved. 5,000 young people every single week on average. And I've seen satellite pictures. You don't want to see these pictures. We'll have to see what happens.
Chuck, Putin and Zelensky don't seem to care as much about the death toll as President Trump does. How can that be?
Oh, Pastor, they're dancing with the devil. And, you know, they're in a death match. And it's really sad. And the president is absolutely spot on. They're just grinding up a generation of young men. And that doesn't count the civilian casualties. And then when you add on top of that all of the destruction, it will take billions of dollars to rebuild those cities. They're nothing but a bunch of Gazas spread all over eastern and northeastern Ukraine. So I think the president is going to be the one who finally brokers a deal. But Zelensky is saying it started in the Crimea. It's going to end in the Crimea, meaning I'm not giving up the Crimea. I want it back. That is not going to happen under any stretch of the imagination. And the Russians are not going to give up a lot of the land that they took with and paid for in blood and treasure. They're not going to give it up. So Zelensky has to realize that he gave up and lost about 20% of his country. And Putin's going to have to realize that he's going to have to knock this thing off. He's not going to get what he wants, which is the overthrow and therefore control of the Ukraine. He doesn't want to have to manage it himself. He just wants a friendly government in there. Mm-hmm. What he's going to get is part of the Donbass, the Crimea, a ceasefire. Zelensky will stay in power until the next election, and there won't be any NATO troops put in or NATO membership for Ukraine. Maybe peacekeepers, but not NATO membership. And I think we're going to have to settle for that as a minimum.
Well, Captain Nash, please stay with us for another segment. In a moment, we'll talk about what Putin was unable to accomplish and what it says about the state of the Russian military. And after that, some thoughts of my own on all of this. We'll be right back. We're back now with Captain Chuck Nash, a man with a career full of many military accomplishments. Speaking for all of our viewers, thank you, Captain Nash, for your great service to our country.
My pleasure, Pastor. And this Memorial Day weekend, I was thinking that, sometimes people don't understand the meaning of these things. And one of them is that in Armed Forces Day, we celebrate and thank those who are wearing the uniform. And on Veterans Day, we thank those who used to wear the uniform and took it off. And in Memorial Day, we honor the memory of those who never got the chance to take off the uniform.
Amen. Well, let's get back to Russia. When Putin invaded Ukraine, it was believed that he wasn't going to stop until he took the capital of Kiev. But his tanks got stuck in the mud and his supply chain failed, and he failed, at least in terms of his initial goal. What does that tell you about his military and his strategic decisions going forward?
The Russian military is just absolutely riddled with corruption. And when it came time to take a force that he thought he had in being and actually employ it, he realized the tires were second rate and coming off vehicles. The tanks were breaking down. They couldn't supply the fuel to the tanks to keep them moving. They bottled up on the road. And we all saw the results of that, where the drones would go out and just start whacking all of that armor and destroying it. Well, several years later, they've learned the lesson. They're getting resupplied with ammunition from North Korea. China is assisting them. They're rebuilding their infrastructure, their military structure, and they will probably emerge militarily stronger than when they went in, because it will be a fighting military. The only problem is they've chewed up a generation. So even though they have far more men than does Ukraine, it doesn't matter, because those who are fit and able to fight, that percentage of their men, many of them have been, unfortunately, to the president's words, wasted and killed.
As you mentioned, along the way, Putin has gotten ammunition from North Korea, but he's actually also gotten troops from there. So I wonder if whatever peace deal is hopefully accomplished, do you think this might just be a holding pattern until he's able to rebuild more completely this broken military? You've spoken to it some, but there's a lot of work to be done, it seems.
I think really that this will be the end of it for Russia, as far as this type of warfare. Now, will they continue to work surreptitiously behind the scenes? Will they continue clandestine operations? Yes, absolutely. They will try to influence the politics of the West. But if you look at that West and you look at what is on his western border, it's NATO countries. And NATO is a shell. It's been underinvested in. Most of the members have not been putting in their 2% of GDP investment. The German army, the Bundeswehr, they couldn't field an army for more than 2 weeks. And if you recall, when what I call Hillary's War, when we joined the EU and went down into Libya, the EU ran out of ammunition after 3 days, and the United States had to supply the intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and a lot of the ammunition. Well, we've been sending a lot of ammunition to Ukraine. Our stockpiles are low, and we've been firing $500,000 missiles at $20,000 drones launched by the Houthis. So there's going to have to be a reconciliation here, where we look at the books, look at the stockpiles, and see what we've got. And our stuff is very exquisite. Therefore, you can't just be the arsenal of democracy, turn on the factories and crank this stuff out. It requires thousands of parts, and all you have to do is have one part in the supply chain missing, and the whole weapon is useless. It's not the weapon. It's just a bunch of parts waiting for that key element. So the president has been absolutely insistent on bringing capabilities back to the United States so that we are no longer dependent on foreign nations That's going to be a tough job. It's going to take a while. But the first things first are the defense industry and pharmaceuticals, because we need to be able to provide defense and to handle epidemics and other things that require a robust pharmaceutical industry.
Well, Captain Nash, thank you for your time today. Will you be able to stay for another program so we can cover some more of the topics that are pushing us into the news?
I'd be very happy to.
Great. Well, next up, my thoughts on what the rest of us can do to help. It's not just a Pentagon issue. I'll be right back. When the Ukraine war first began, for weeks I was on Zoom calls on a regular basis with leaders in the Christian community of Ukraine. It was tragic to hear the stories, the civilian populations being targeted, the apartment buildings that were being decimated by rocket fire. We bought vans, we sent food and clothing. We were doing whatever we could to provide support and resources for the people that were trapped in that horrific conflict. Unfortunately, it seems the leadership of Russia and the leadership of Ukraine not in a rush to bring an end to that war that has cost more than 1 million lives. It's as if human life is expendable, just another number. Well, I'm thankful for the grown-up voices that are saying we have to bring a resolution to that conflict because life is indeed precious. Well, I want to remind you that this Monday is Memorial Day. And while many will be participating in barbecues and enjoying an extra day off from work, let's not forget the solemn reason for this holiday: to honor the people who gave their lives to protect ours. Since the American Revolution, more than 1.3 million Americans have died protecting our freedoms. Let this Memorial Day be one of reflection and reverence as we honor those brave soldiers, men and women, who didn't seek their own interest, but instead sacrificed their lives to protect ours. Over this holiday weekend, take time to stop your normal daily activities to remember those who gave their lives so that we could have normal days. Let's also honor their sacrifice by considering what will be said of us. Are we willing to endure hardship and even loss to protect the freedoms of our children and grandchildren? If we want to see our communities change, we as the church must have the courage to raise our voices in a new way, even at the risk of persecution. Let's show the boldness of the people of God and faith. It's not unique to our generation. You know, it's one thing to serve the Lord when it brings smiles and gratitude. It's something altogether different when it brings anger and resentment. If we'll choose to honor God, I promise there's more reasons for hope than despair. I'll be back with your emails in just a moment. Stay with us. And we thank you so much for taking the time to watch our program. Just a reminder, you can go to ajnow.com. There's an archive there of all the programs. You can catch up on the ones you may miss. You can even sign up for a free newsletter that will keep you up to speed on all that's happening around our program. And maybe most importantly, share the idea with a friend. Get your friends to watch, and we can share the truth with more people. Thanks for your emails. They're always a highlight. Ruth from California noted, "Your new show and weekly ministries are wonderful. They bless me to know more about God's character than I ever knew. But here's a question for you. Why don't the European countries that constantly complain about Israel not giving the Palestinians aid know that every bit of food or medical aid is taken by Hamas and that Hamas doesn't give those items to the Palestinian people or to the hostages either?" I don't think it's a lack of awareness. I think it's a lack of concern. It's politically expedient to keep that Palestinian topic one of agitation against Israel. We'll have to have a heart change before we get to a political change. Robin emailed, "Can you put more of the Culture and Christianity podcast shows on Fridays? I liked the one you had on. It was really good." Well, Robin, we'll see what we can do. Thanks for the suggestion. And finally, a viewer commented on the YouTube episode with Pete Peterson. "I love this broadcast. I'm in agreement with you, but this also gives me understanding and insight on what I don't know. Thank you for your guest and the wisdom of the Holy Spirit, which guides you so you can give what we need to learn about now and what God has in store. Bless you." Well, thank you for the encouragement, and I agree. I learned from our guests every program. I seem to go away from the programs feeling like I've been to school. I hope you have that same feeling. Then Kathy M. from Florida said, we love this program and your Sunday teachings. You remind us that there's more reason for hope than despair. We need the daily encouragement of those words from a pastor who really believes this. Well, I'm grateful for the opportunity, but you can use your words to be a voice of encouragement to the people around you, and in that way we can pay it forward. Thank you for watching tonight. I'm Alan Jackson, and I pray you have a wonderful evening.